Hello and welcome to A Woman's Heart, where we offer hope, encouragement, and real-life application to untangle the lies we believe and pursue the passion God has placed in our hearts. I'm Lisa Granger. We are back to some more fiction in the summer reading series. This time we have Pepper Basham sharing her journey as an award-winning author who writes romance peppered with grace and humor. And we have some behind the scenes on her latest book, Loyally Luke, a rom-com with a flannel-wearing guy and a princess. For the summer reading list and to stay in touch, go to my website, lisagranger.com/summer-reading. You can also find the other conversations in the summer reading series on the website under podcast. Let's join in for the conversation with Pepper. Welcome to A Woman's Heart. I am looking forward to our conversation today with Pepper Basham. Thanks so much for joining us today, Pepper.
I'm so glad to be with you.
Yes. Now, I thoroughly enjoyed one of your latest books. I am looking forward to trying out some more because you have quite a bit of a variety of books that you have written. But first of all, I would love for me and listeners to get to know you a little better. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and something fun that isn't normally in your bio.
Okay. Well, I am a writer of historical and contemporary romance. Most everything I write has some sort of inspirational thread. Some of the stories kind of whisper faith, and some of them say it a little bit louder.
Okay.
So that's kind of like how I like to describe the variety. I am a mom of 5. I have 5 amazing kids that are my favorite people in the world to hang out with. And I am a speech pathologist by day. So I work with kids and adults with a variety of speech language needs and enjoy serving in that kind of way the community that I live in Asheville, North Carolina. So
yes.
I'm an Appalachian girl. I'm an Appalachian girl from many generations back, Appalachian. And so I love writing about the Appalachian culture as well as my unashamed love of England and the UK and all of that. So
and royals, yes. Oh, and
that
that came into play in this latest book. Well, Asheville is a beautiful area. I haven't been in a while, but I have been out. I've been out to Biltmore and Asheville, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's a gorgeous area to be from.
Definitely inspirational too for that. When I write in the Edwardian time period, Biltmore is right around that time period when it was built, and so it's a great place to go to kind of imagine while I'm writing.
Yeah. What a shame you'd have to go to Biltmore to do research.
Oh my gosh. I guess something that's not in my bio would be that every time I travel to a different place, like a different country, I always try to find a children's book to bring back. I love children's books. And so one of my goals every time I visit a new place, especially if it's a new country, is to bring back a children's book that's special to that country. So that's something I like to collect. That and teacups.
Oh, very good. Well, yeah, sometimes I've thought about collecting teacups, and then I wonder where I would put them all. But they certainly are pretty. And the children's book is different. Very interesting. And I imagine it would be very indicative of what that country is like to see one of their children's books, because it's going to have kind of the native culture in the book.
And lots of times I like to get like the fairy tale side of it, because like I've been to Scotland, Ireland, and England, and each time I want to get what's some of their lore, what's the folk tales. And since I work a lot with kids in my day job, I've always loved using children's books. So that's just a natural love, and getting to do that too made it even more fun.
Oh yeah, you get two for one in that one. You can kind of use it for work and use it for research and writing, and then just kind of enjoy as well. So actually that would be 3 wins that you get there.
Right.
Wow. Well, that is very interesting. And also, how did that play into with children's books and your writing? Did you always enjoy reading? Did you always enjoy writing?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
I come from, if you are familiar with the Appalachian culture, it's a culture that struggled with literacy for a long time.
Yes, it did.
And so my love for reading was kind of an interesting little anomaly sometimes among the culture itself. And so I fell in love with reading pretty early on. I was writing stories really early. And so early that my grandmother, when I was 10 years old, she bought me a secondhand typewriter from a yard sale and said, "This is what writers need." And it was the first time
Wow.
anybody had called me a writer. And that was like this wonderful sense of, oh, she thinks that I have something worth exploring. And so that was just such a blessing to have someone that I admired so much in my life kind of recognize a gift that I wasn't even fully aware of yet as a
Mm-hmm.
little girl, right? And
Yeah.
then, yeah, it was very sweet. And then when I was in sixth grade, which was similar around the same time period, I read The Secret Garden for the first time, and it
Mm.
introduced me to England. And I had no concept of England because I grew up in this little bitty place in the mountains, and we didn't travel, and
Yeah.
it was just you and your family and the little community that you had there, and it was this introduction into this world that seemed very magical and old. And
Mm.
so that kind of started my love for England, which thankfully I've gotten to continue that love in my own fictional stories in the future.
Yes.
That's been great.
Yeah, well, and what a blessing for your grandmother to notice that and kind of call it out and plant the seed in you. What a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I'm kind of curious, do you still have that typewriter?
No, I wish
Ah,
it was already secondhand, so it had sticking keys and stuff like that. And so when I got into high school, I worked a job to save my money to buy my own new electric typewriter.
I remember those.
I felt like I had arrived. And so that was in high school. So we had to get rid of that typewriter. I wish I had kept it though, just for the sentimental reason that it was
Yes.
her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I love having that memory.
Yeah, you still have the memory, and where would you keep it? It would just have to sit on a table somewhere with a
Right.
vase of flowers near it or something like that. It probably doesn't work very well at all. But what a beautiful memory that you have of your grandmother calling that out and giving that to you and kind of getting the seed and going on. In your journey with writing, were there times that maybe you had some obstacles there or some doubts and lies that were sneaking in? Oh, well, no, I'm not very good. I shouldn't do this. What were some of those?
Yeah, and those don't stop very easily either.
No,
Even
they don't.
no. So writing for me had to take a back seat to getting a paying job because I wasn't published for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and I was going to college, having children, and my husband and I, you start a family and things get busy, and you have to do the stuff that pays the bills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I would still kind of find little bitty pieces of time to write within all of that,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't a lot I could dedicate to writing until my kids got a teeny bit older and I could start really learning the craft and learning who to contact with these story ideas I
Yeah.
had and starting to build community. So the whole time you're writing, for me, it's been the question of this is a horrible story, and the struggle of this, who would want to read something like this, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
never be good enough. And a lot of circumstances, when you're talking about obstacles, a lot of circumstances kind of seemed to confirm the lie to
Mm-hmm.
me. I was getting lots of rejections. I was not getting an agent. People were not wanting to support. I was not finally in contests, all the things that we humans see that make us try to label ourselves as something or confirm a lie that we're believing. But I still had this drive and this love and this passion that I'd had my whole life. And so God has slowly been cultivating in me the idea that I write out of joy, and the joy is for Him. And it doesn't matter. It does matter, right? What happens to those stories. But in the grand scheme of things, the audience is one. And if I'm glorifying Him with what I'm doing, then what I see doesn't always have to match what's true in what I'm believing, right? If the lie that's saying, this isn't good enough, you're never going to get published, your writing is never going to inspire people. Who wants to read what you have to say? And if my audience is the Lord primarily,
Mm-hmm.
then I win either way, right? Because He's given me the talent and the gift to do this, but given me the story ideas. And so there's where he's been growing me. I'm not there yet completely because because I still struggle with self-doubt on a regular basis, and I still struggle with the comparison game that is within our culture and within our humanity. But he's making growth in me to where that's not always my first thought, is that, oh, this isn't good enough.
Yeah, or it doesn't stick around too long.
Right.
I love that. And it is. I've spoken to several authors, and there is a lot of that in the rejection, and you just have to keep pushing through. And yeah, I know one person said, oh, they just figured, well, they loved being a writer. They would publish a book, they'd get rich. And and we both just started laughing because it was like, yeah, said no real author ever.
Or very, very few. Right?
Yes.
Very, very few go and all of a sudden, boom, the Cinderella story has happened, right? And people don't discuss the after you're published struggles, because you're still submitting and you're still getting rejections and you're still trying to figure out how to grow your skill set, grow your stories, give people more variety, but also write the things that God's placed on your heart. That struggle continues, and I pray that I continue to grow along as the struggle continues, and suffering is one of God's biggest tools to help us keep our eyes on him, and obstacles do that,
Yeah, they do. And inevitably, once we get through one and we think, oh, I got the hang of that one, I'm good to go, something else comes and you're like, oh, well, I don't have that one.
Yeah, oops, or I thought I had that, but it's just away.
Maybe not.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and when you're writing, what is maybe your overall intention for your readers, just generally speaking?
So I really want to bring hope through my stories. And sometimes that hope looks like people persevering through trials in a dramatic sort of way, which people can find in like my Appalachian historical books, or in Hope Between the Pages, which takes place at Biltmore. So you can, that hope, pushing through, the perseverance of making it to the end. But I also like hope wrapped in humor, which you get a lot of times with my contemporary books. They're much more overtly humorous, but all of them have this undercurrent of hope. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful things that we have as Christians, is this ultimate understanding that we are loved unconditionally and that our futures are secure. And so in the middle of life and hard times and insecurities and all the things that we struggle with, the ultimate end of the story is a happily ever after. And there's so much hope in that.
Yeah, and I do like a good happy ever after story.
So do I.
Yeah, some people are like, well, that's not real life. And I'm like, exactly. If I want doom and gloom, I can look at real life in the news. There's enough of that out there. I want a happy ever after. I want something fun and uplifting to read and escape with everything else. And going along with that, when you're writing, I love the question that you had on there. What about writing makes your heart sing?
Well, I mean, I could be really flippant and say I love writing the kissing scenes. Those make my heart sing. I do enjoy those quite a bit. But I think the thing that I find such pleasure in is watching characters learn what love can do. Learn this beauty and this power. And it doesn't mean that there are not still hard things that happen.
Yeah.
But you feel this security of belonging. Somebody asked me recently, do I have a theme in my books? And I hadn't really spent a lot of time thinking about that before. I always thought, oh, they're hopeful, right? But I realized there's a deeper thing, even than that, that it brings me joy to write it. I realized is that I love to create stories where people find where they belong. And I think that we're all searching for that in different ways. Mm-hmm. And as Christians, we have that. We may not always understand the depth of what we have, because we live in moments of I understand Jesus loves me. Oh, does Jesus love me?
Yeah.
We live in those kinds of moments. And I think when we grasp, even for a few seconds, the bigness of God's love for us, there's this sense of peace and joy and overwhelming beauty. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what brings me joy when I'm writing these stories, is to watch how people find where they belong. Is it to belong with another person? Is it to belong in a family, in a community? Whatever that is, there's this sense throughout, I think, every one of my books where people are trying to find the main reason God's called them to be who they are and
Yeah.
what has made them to be, their purpose and belonging.
Yeah. Well, and I can't speak to many of your other books. I've only read the one so far. But when you mention what happens to us when we're loved well, that was something I definitely picked up on in the book that I read, Loyally Luke, which the cover of it was all about, oh, I hate rom-coms, yuck, send me more testosterone, which I just had to giggle on the outside cover of the book. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
But there really was in this one, and this was the third in a series. So how did you, and they're very different. Like I said, I've only read the one, and it covers a family, and then he ends up in this it's a not real country of
Yes.
Skymar near
Fictional
Scotland.
country for a fictional book.
Yes, it is. But it sounds beautiful. I mean, it sounds like a beautiful location, and all. But I definitely got the sense throughout that book, you saw the characters as they're going through and what they're able to do and how they're able to grow by being loved well by one another. So was that on purpose? Is that just kind of part of your theme, or talk to us a little bit about this latest book, Loyally Luke?
It is the third in the book, and I'm going to try not to give any spoilers for the first two.
Yeah, I know.
But
we just meet other family members and their backstory.
yes, all three have a similar vibe because they're all rom-com, and they're all about the three members of a family who are trying to find, well, Luke isn't looking for love.
No, he's not looking for it at all.
It finds him, and he's begrudging it a little bit. Like, no, please, I'm not.
Yes.
Oh
Yeah, no.
And, but the whole series is really this. I love as much of the characters finding their romance as I do watching them care for each other as family members. Family dynamic in this series, I think, is one of my favorite I've ever written because the characters are so different than each other. The three main siblings that you get to read about, Izzy, Penelope, and Luke, their personalities are so different than each other, but there's this sense of, I've got you. I'm with you. We love each other. And even in our differences, we're going to, encourage each other, but also correct each other and tease and all that kind of stuff. So I described Izzy's book, Authentically Izzy, as the bookish lovers novel. Penelope's book is the musicals lovers, musical theater lovers.
Okay.
Full of joy. It is like a joy book. The whole book is just full of joy. So, and Izzy's is probably full of finding where you belong, learning to be brave. And then Luke's book has the movie references and all the Hallmark tropes. It's more of that one. And it really is about choosing love. Even if it's hard, you choose the right thing. And sometimes you don't get the happily ever after. Sometimes the best choice is the one that is for other people. And so there was a lot about that was a little bit harder to write because I write for the happily ever after, and I'm not saying it doesn't have a happily ever after.
Yes, I know. Well, that's one of my questions. What was part of the challenging things of writing this book?
Right. But the love part is that love comes in a lot of different forms, and sometimes lots of times love is self-sacrifice. So there's a lot of self-sacrificial sort of conversations and thoughts that happen in Loyally Luke, where what am I willing to give up? What do I have to sacrifice to do the right thing?
Yeah, and what's best for them. I may not like it, but what's best for them. But not to the point, but I never had the feeling either that they were willing to sacrifice because they were thinking of the others, but they also did admit what they wanted. I mean, there wasn't a denying of or glossing over or burying what they wanted. That was pretty much that was out there. But I did like how they were looking at each other, and you brought in a couple of other little characters and themes, and I kind of liked where he was all this there was one scene, I don't think we'll give away too much, where they were talking about something and he was like, he just lost all of his man points. And I just cackled out loud as I'm reading this. And then somebody brought in a big Rambo movie reference, and he's like, okay, some of the man points were restored. Growing up with sisters and everything else, it's like he has to be this gruff person on the outside, but on the inside he really is just so nice and kind. And I think what cinnamon roll inside is that what?
I think that's the term. He would hate it if he knew that you said that.
Yes,
but it would be true. I think too that I love that they have to, how adult their conversations are. The hero and the heroine, Luke and Ellie. Lots of times, and I've done this too in my writing because it either fit the story or was the way the story was working, is that there's that miscommunication trope that happens and then there's a breakup. And in this case, they talked about, we're going to make this decision. And it's not that I don't care about you. It's not that I wouldn't love a future with you, but we have to make this decision. And they both were very adult about it. Yes. And I think that's something I really enjoyed writing, because I don't know that I'd written one exactly like that before, to try to show how people who are spiritually mature and just a mature person are trying to handle things in a way that you're trying to reduce as much angst as possible. You want to be upfront. If you really care about somebody, you want to give them the truth and face the difficulties together, even if it's not the answer you want. And I liked being able to show that. That was a new kind of thing.
Yeah, and there were a couple of times where they were very upset over something that had happened, but they would talk to their friends or whatever, and they'd say, okay, maybe that wasn't the best way to do it, but look at it from the other side, and maybe you can kind of understand where they were coming from and why they made the decisions they did. Whether you agree with them or whether you were hurt by them, look at the other side and the other perspective of that. And frequently they'd kind of go, oh, well, it still doesn't mean I like it, but okay, I can see the other side. Yeah. And why am I going to just continue to be angry about this when I do see where they were coming from?
Don't you think that oftentimes when we really love someone, we should have, I'm not saying we always are, but it's pointing that finger at me, but we should have a ready forgiveness because of what we've been forgiven as Christians. We're called to forgive in that kind of way because love is that big. And I'm not an expert at that. I struggle with that too. Like everybody, when we're hurt, we don't respond in the best ways sometimes. And so, but I think that that's a great example of when we really know we're loved and we really love, shouldn't forgiveness look different than the world's forgiveness?
So I think they were also made a point of believing the best because, yes, there's the forgiveness, but there's always looking. And I have to remind myself sometimes when I have a wonderful husband, but secret, sometimes he makes me mad. And shock, gasp, oh no. And sometimes I have to remind myself, like, okay, that was really very irritating, but he didn't do it on purpose. There was no malice behind it. And maybe it was dumb in my eyes, but back the crazy train up and go, this was not intentional. He really did mean well, even though it didn't work out. And so, okay, let it go.
Right, and that's the love part coming in, right? And I'm not saying there aren't some really, really hardcore things that happen that we have to struggle with. I'm not saying that, but your example is great because it's one of those everyday kinds of things where, is this really a big deal? Do I really need to be frustrated about this? It happens in my house too, and so it's one of those things where you're reminding yourself of the love you have for your husband, and my love is bigger than those little things. It's not something to hold on to. And I think I wanted to try to show some of that, and I really, which was not a Hallmark trope actually, because miscommunication happens all over Hallmark.
Oh yes, it does. Well, and I kind of like the fact that every now and again you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much like a Hallmark movie, except that you were kind of constantly digging and making fun of it. So you kind of have to go, well, okay. And he's rolling his eyes throughout different things. And I just found it very funny and very heartwarming as well. So I thoroughly enjoyed that book, and we'll look forward to reading some more when I'm not crunched for reading multiple books all at once. No, one of the questions I did have, and we've kind of touched on it here and there, but throughout your books, you mentioned some kind of have a whisper of faith, some are a little more overt. How has writing some of these stories and exploring these characters and diving into this affected your faith and vice versa? Because we kind of already know that your faith has influenced your books. Has the writing and digging into these kind of come around and affected your faith as well?
Oh, for certain. It's almost like a shocker here that God knows what story I'm going to write next and peels back my own personal struggles and my own personal needs for growth when I'm writing these characters, because as a writer, you get deep into the psyche of the people you're writing about. And one of my first questions I ask my characters when I first start a story is, what is God trying to teach you in this story? Sometimes I'm the only one who knows the answer to that. Sometimes readers get to find out through the story, right? If it's more of that whisper kind of thing, I'm the one maybe who is the only one who knows the answer because I don't make it loud in the story. But most of the time, one of the characters, either the hero or the heroine, is struggling with something that God's trying to show in my own heart that I'm struggling with. And it's never failed. Every book, there's been something that was specifically meant to prick at my heart to say, Pepper, this is where you need to surrender a little more to me. Or on the opposite side, and I'm going to try not to get emotional about this. So Izzy came out the week Izzy released, Authentically Izzy released. I was, of course, celebrating,
yeah.
and I was editing Positively Penelope. And Izzy was just such a fun book to write, and I just released it, celebrating it, and my dad passed away unexpectedly that weekend after it was released. And I'm a daddy's girl. We were really close, and I'm editing Penelope, and Penelope is a joyful book, but it also deals with grief. And God, in his timing, had me reading words I had written before my dad passed away back to myself about what grief looks like when you belong to Christ. And it's not overt, but I knew what it meant, right? Because I wrote those characters. And in his kindness to me, the book became a comfort in my grieving, because I was being reminded of the bigger picture, that gratitude and grief blend together and still can find joy together, because there is so much to be thankful for. And that was in Penelope's book before I knew I was going to be facing such a hard grief. And God used that timing to minister to my heart in a way that was so intimate, because they were my words, right?
Yeah.
Even, it's crazy. My words back to me about grief and about grace and about joy, that was one of the most amazing examples of that in my life.
Yeah, I really like it when you get those little God winks or those little whispers from him, kind of going, it's okay. I see it. I see you, and I see what that is. And I did notice the acknowledgments in Loyally Luke that your dad had a part in that too. So that was extra hard when you'd already lost your dad, and then this book was, so you're kind of done with the family too. So I thought that was a very sweet acknowledgement to your dad. And
it was the last book the two of us brainstormed together. So that was special too.
Yeah, so a lot of special things wrapped up in this series, and we can certainly encourage people to go out and check them all out. You don't have to read them in order. I haven't. I just started with Loyally Luke, and now I'll have to go back and read the others, so they can do it in any order they want to. But they
can. Now, if you don't want spoilers, you would probably want to start with Izzy.
Well, yeah, because now I already know who ends up with who, starting with Luke. But, I'm like, okay, that's okay. I'm still a sucker for wanting to read all the backstory, even if I know the ending, which sometimes, depending on the day, I may skip to the end just to make sure.
Yeah, right. Make sure this is going to be, you're getting happily ever after of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll encourage people to check them out. It was a wonderful summer read for me. I thoroughly enjoyed just kind of escaping into Skymar and meeting all of the characters there. And as we're wrapping up, one of the things I like to ask is, what would you say to encourage someone to pursue the passion that God has placed in their heart?
I would say what I would probably say to anybody who's a Christian is that, and this is for me too, is to get to know Jesus and his love for us, because our ultimate passion should be him, right? And out of knowing how much we're loved, we are able to really walk in our gifts better. And I would also say, if you're practically trying to follow with a passion like writing or art or whatever the case may be, to breathe grace for yourself. It's really easy to beat yourself up when you're pursuing something that's tough, when you're pursuing something where there's a whole lot of, you can get a whole lot of rejection, a whole lot of negative words back to you. And if God has placed that on your heart, then take the time to still love what you do. And it might be a slow journey. It might be a marathon, but it doesn't mean that that's not. Even the marathon is teaching you things to make you better in what he's called you to do.
Yeah, very wise words. Thank you. That is very
trial.
good.
Still learning through trial.
But aren't we all? Aren't we all? Oh, Pepper, if someone wants to connect with you, find out more about the latest book, Loyally Luke, or all the books about Izzy and Penelope, and then all the other books that you have I'm curious about the one that's at Biltmore House. How can they connect with you?
My webpage is pepperdbasham.com. You can find all my books listed there, and I love engaging with readers. So I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. Those are my primary places that I usually communicate. And so if people want to check me out there, that would be awesome.
Okay. Now, is there any hint on social media about what you're working on next?
Yes, I'm currently editing a book that comes out in April 2025 called Some Like It Scott.
Oh.
And it takes place in Scotland, shocker. But I have 2 books coming out in October. One is called Hope Like Wildflowers, another Appalachian historical romance, and a Christmas novella called The Mistletoe Prince, which is the last book that's related to the Edgewood with Izzy, Penelope, and Luke. So you'll get to see a little bit of them pop into that story in October. But Some Like It Scott comes out in April.
All right. Now I like that title. That's fun. That's a lot of fun. So we will look forward to seeing that one coming out next year, and then some of the other ones coming out in the fall. And Pepper, thanks so much for joining us today. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining me on A Woman's Heart. I'm Lisa Granger. I really enjoyed Pepper Basham's book and encourage you to check out Loyally Luke or any of her other books. You can find the whole summer reading list on my website, lisagranger.com, along with the show notes and the other episodes of the summer reading series.